Shalom, everyone. Erev Tov. I would like to start with a quick overview of where we are, where we're standing. As we said, it'll be a series. It won't be one time or two time. We'll have a series. How should Orthodoxy relate to other denominations? And we had some discussion last time, and I will relate to that as well. But to do so, I'm going to try and for myself, let's see, can I do better than this? For myself, I see only one person, or let's see. Yeah, speaker will give me myself or other people if they speak up.
Do view and do gallery.
I'm in gallery, but the thing is, I want to see my document at the same time.
When you're on document, click on the gallery. It's, I think, an option like that.
When I have what?
When you are on your document, go on it.
On what?
When you open the document, the one you had before.
Okay. The document is here.
Yes, and here you should have an option on the for the gallery now.
No. I have to go back into it to get the gallery, which is what I'm on. But anyhow, okay. So,
Did you share the document?
sorry?
Did you share the document?
No, I don't.
You don't want to share.
You know what? I can share it. That you know, you're right. I can share it, and then it makes everything easier.
Yes.
You're right. You are correct. Okay. Okay, this way is better. This way I see a few people, and I'm sharing a document. I'm not sharing it so that other people can see it, but if you see it, it's okay. I'll remind you, this is a booklet. If I remember, I will bring some, David on Shabbat. It's in Hebrew, and it's called Lizromim Azramim, question mark. Denominations in Hebrew are called Zramim, different ways that the rivers flow, okay? Water flowing in different directions. So these are different denominations in which their Yahadut is, so to speak, flowing in different forms in different ways. And then the question is, should we flow with the flow? Should we, in Hebrew, Lizromim Azramim, should we go ahead with these different denominations, or should we be fighting them or things like that? We mentioned last time, again, this is a booklet written by Rav Ronen Luvitz, for which I was asked to make comments. So the final draft is may have in it one or two words that I put in. But in any case, he says there are three basic attitudes in the Israeli society towards other denominations: keep away and struggle against. Sometimes you have to cooperate for Jewish purposes, for joint interests, but not to cooperate for inner Jewish issues, not to make joint projects or prayers or things like that. Attitude number 3, it would say that it's a partial and incomplete Judaism, yet at the same time, it also makes a positive contribution. I think we were discussing something along those lines last time we discussed this. And in this booklet, he says, I would like to claim that no, we should be going beyond the third attitude, where it's something that we can sort of not accept as accepting the belief or the framework, but accept that this will be part of Am Yisrael, as we say in Hebrew, to be sovlani. Sovlani means in English to be, what's the term?
Tolerant.
But exactly, but the word to tolerate means you tolerate something. It means you don't agree with it, may not like it, may be against it, but I'll be tolerant. Meaning he's saying it's beyond tolerance. We should be beyond being tolerant. We should see it as something which is positive for some people in Am Yisrael, and we'll get back to that later on. Yes.
Last week you were talking about this conference in honor of Heschel.
Yes.
And I was thinking about it a lot. And it really bothers me that only 3 rabbis were in favor of it, because Heschel is one of the great philosophers of Judaism. And first you should read what he says, and then you might classify. Right.
Allow me, Eliezer, to put myself in good company, okay? And tell you, Eliezer is saying that I described 2 weeks ago that there was some discussion in a group of rabbis in Ra'anana about an evening about Rabbi Heschel that is put together by the Masorti conservative community in Ra'anana, which created a discussion amongst different rabbis in Ra'anana. I said I was positively surprised that there were three rabbis, not myself, three Orthodox rabbis in Ra'anana, who were being at least partially positive towards having an event of the conservative community in Ra'anana, because they were saying just along these lines that there are people who need this, there are people for whom this is their Jewish identity, and they are part of the society. We have to be tolerant towards them and things like that. And I was saying I was pleasantly surprised, and Eliezer was upset that there were only three rabbis supporting it. Well, first of all, maybe others were like I was. I wasn't taking an active part in the discussion, but I understand what you're saying, and I'd like to say to Eliezer that I'm in good company. Eliezer said, first of all, read what he says, study about the person. By the way, the last two Shabbatot I read in one of the books, this young Israeli person who is making Rabbi Heschel more known in Israel is called Dror Bondi. And he, in one of the books, he put together a compilation of articles or lectures that were given by Rabbi Heschel, including a short biography written by his daughter, Susanna, I believe her name is. Very interesting. I read the biography, short biography. It's not a book, a biography. It's like a maybe a 10-page description of his lifetime. And there were some very interesting things that I found in there. And I was happy to read it. But yes, I have to do a lot more study to understand who he was, what he represented in a deeper way. But I'm just saying to Eliezer, this is very common that you don't, once a person is adopted by a certain movement, and Heschel taught at JTS in the United States, in the conservative Beit Midrash, once he made that decision, he was, of course, he has the headline conservative, no matter what were his personal, decisions in his life about halakha, how he kept halakha, and things like that. And once he's adopted by the conservative Masorti movement here, and they're making an evening about him, we're not interested to discuss who he is, but do we cooperate with the evening or so on? And Eliezer is upset that only three Orthodox rabbis here in Ra'anana were supporting the evening. So I just want to say that I am in good company in that sense, because some people speak ill of me in Ra'anana, which maybe I should be very proud of, or maybe I should be ashamed of. Well, I'll leave that to others. But in any case, I said to someone once, someone apologized to me once. One day I'd like to tell this story in the Kila because I want to make a shiur out of it, not out of me, about what are the borders, what are the borderlines, what are the, where should we be more makil, more lenient, how far can we go, and so on. But in any case, someone apologized to me that someone spoke ill of me and he didn't protest. So I said, what did he say to you that you didn't protest? He said, Rav Tzvi doesn't know how to say no. Okay, that was his terrible thing to say about me. I mentioned this to my children on one of the chagim at the table, and my children said, "Oh, good for you, Abba. That should be the worst thing anyone should say about you." But I understand where he's coming from, because I will say yes to a lot of things that he won't say yes to. But I said to this person, next time someone says to you something about me, ask him a simple question: have you ever spoken with him? Did this person ever speak with me? Ever ask me what my opinions are? What are the criteria through which I function? If he didn't, tell him, speak with him, not about him. Okay, please always speak with a person, not only before you speak about him, speak with a person. Maybe after you've spoken with a person, you have a total disagreement with him, then you can speak about him, but don't just go speaking about someone without knowing exactly who he is. So I agree, but let's get back into
I wrote this book. It's and
Shabbat and the earth. Yeah.
I mean, it's so beautiful. It's really so beautiful. It talks about Shabbat as a creation in the realm of time.
There's there are a lot of inspiring things to take from him. Undoubtedly, we agree. Although I have not done enough of that, reading and taking inspiration, being inspired by Heschel, but I agree that that's something that I'm missing and I'm trying to catch up with. By the way, my daughter is ahead of me. A younger generation that has already been exposed to Heschel more than my generation. She did one of her one of her papers, not a master's thesis, but one of her papers on the way to her master's, my younger daughter, she did about him. In any case, so she's ahead of me. In any case, so I'd like to go back to our description. So this is the basic concept of, are you against? Do you try to ignore? Do you try to fight with them? Do you accept them a little bit? And Rav Lubitz is saying more. They should be part of what goes on in Israeli society because they will have a positive impact. Then we tried to go through quickly, and I'd like to try and complete that today. A short version, as the headline here is, Kitzur Toldot HaReform, a short description of the history of the Reform movement, being created in Germany and Holland in the beginning of the 19th century. This is an important point that I'd like to come back to in summary soon. It attracted mostly people who were older and younger who had already become estranged to the world of mitzvot, were estranged to the traditional communities and the usual Batei Knesset. This is a major issue, and we'll get back to that later on. What it did is it tried to make the shuls, make the communities and the Batei Knesset such that they would be okay with European culture. It wasn't about mitzvot. The focus was not about mitzvot, was not about keeping the yoke of mitzvot. It was a Jewish life that was very similar to Christians at the time. You would have once a week coming for prayers, for an experience in Beit Knesset. I am not against experience in Beit Knesset, but experience in Beit Knesset is not enough. Maybe it's a spiritual experience, maybe it's a cultural experience, maybe it's a religious experience, and even that, it's not enough, but it is better than nothing. Similar to the local churches, putting focus on music, on a choir, on having an organ in the Beit Knesset, like in the churches. In some places, the prayers were in Hebrew, in some places in the language of the state of where they were. One of the things that came up in the discussion 2 weeks ago, and let's have this here earlier on this week, is that there can be a very large variety of what we call reform. Just like we know very well, this is true about Dati Leumi, about being modern Orthodox, or whatever you call it, that's extremely varied. Anyone who says to me the word HaCharidim and says something about HaCharidim, I say no such thing. There's a tremendous variety of Charidim. There are some yeshivot Hesder Charidiyot. Charidim who have a yeshiva where the boys go to the army. Don't get your numbers wrong. It's not thousands, but there are few individual yeshivot like that. And it's important to mention. So saying reform is not describing anything. It's describing something which is very general, vague, and there can be a lot of different kinds of reform. We have to relate to that when we discuss the topic. So the mitzvot that were ceremonial were not that important. The main component of reform was the values of justice and of morality, more universal. It was not obligatory to use Hebrew. They canceled Yom Tov Sheni at the second day of Chag outside of Israel. They took out of the Siddur the issues of returning to Zion, to Israel, building Beit HaMikdash, and having the sacrifices, the korbanot. The desire and the goal, the hope to see the Geulah, redemption, was universal and not Jewish. Peace and closeness between different nations. Once again, this is another point where there can be differences throughout different times and places in the 200 years that the Reform movement exists. And today, do they pray in Hebrew and other languages? Do they pray about Israel and return to Zion or not? These can be differences. I'm sure they don't pray for korbanot, but that's something that will be common and will be joined in all the different Reform keilot. But do they pray for Eretz Yisrael or for return to Eretz Yisrael? That can be different in different places. In the second half of the 19th century, they began to establish communities in the United States. mixed seating of men and women in Beit Knesset. They decided that there's no longer any such thing as Kohanim and Leviim, no need for them. No more Chalitza, which is if a woman is married, her husband dies without children, he has a brother. It's an unpleasant ceremony that has to be done according to the Torah. They canceled that. A divorce, civil divorce is good enough. Took out belief in Tchiyat HaMetim. I happen to be teaching now in Matan, the Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin, which discusses the sources, the importance and the sources of the Emunah of Tchiyat HaMetim. And I can understand why they took it out, because there's a very extensive search for the source. But you could claim that it was just made up at a certain time in history, and we don't have to believe in it. I would say about this specific point, without discussing it right now, there's a lot to be discussed about it. You have to understand it. Did you seek answers? Did you seek different ways of looking at it? I can, you're welcome to join my Gemara Shiur in Matan, and we'll continue. Well, actually, we've moved on to Yemot HaMashiach, but I can talk about that separately as a specific point. They, again, only the moral mitzvot are what we care about, not ceremonial or ben adam lamakom. Olam haba, Tchiyat HaMetim, kashrut was taken out. The Torah and the mitzvot are a reflection of something which was primitive. They were good for their time, but they were no longer obligated by them. Am Yisrael is not a nation, but a Jewish, a religious group. Again, I would say today, I don't think that's where they're at. There is today the concept, are you familiar with this concept in Hebrew? Today they call it Amiyut Yehudit. Amiyut from the word Am. Having Jewish Amiyut, nationality, nationalism, not in the not in the fascist, not in the fascist form, but having nationalism as a content that brings us together. They call it Amiyut, and different communities devote some of their energies to that. Should be part of what we do in the communities, connecting between communities in different places in Israel and outside of Israel and so on. He describes here that about 40 communities moved Shabbat to Sunday. So, once you move Shabbat to Sunday, I think you've gone very, very far. But then, in the first half of the 20th century, there's a movement back towards something which is more traditional, towards in the Siddur, in the text being in Hebrew, kippah and talit were forbidden at one point, but they were returned, and probably today in most or all Reform communities, kippah and talit are part of what they have, including men and women, and part of, when I see certain people speaking, rabbis, male or female, it will always be with a talit. That's kind of part of the, I would say, as part of the rabbinic garb, if I may use that term. Just like in a way, I would say that, as a private person, I will not necessarily wear a jacket, but when I spoke just yesterday at the funeral, so it was important for me to have the appearance, put it that way, of a rabbi. So I wore the jacket that I wear for holy days like weddings and lehavdil for funerals, not all funerals, for this one yesterday. So in a similar way, the talit becomes something which is more ceremonial rather than a mitzvah that you have to keep. But this is, I'm just trying to describe the facts now, but it's back in, I would say, kippah and talit. Of course, the Reform were the first, certainly amongst these three denominations, to allow women to be rabbis and had women rabbis. And that's something that at least some of us can connect to, or I don't know, maybe some not, but at least some of us can connect to that. They accepted in 1978 the non-Jewish
marriages, spouses.
Not only marriages, the spouses, right? The spouse. the non-Jewish spouse and the non-Jewish children, and they accept that a child of either a Jewish mother or a Jewish father can be considered Jews. They took out the prohibition of same-sex sexual relations between men and rules for having a same-sex marriage and mixed marriages. Most of his description here is that most of the rabbis and the members are very tolerant towards mixed marriages and without conversion. Some rabbis, some Reform rabbis won't do it themselves, but will give you the number of a different Reform rabbi who will. Some Reform rabbis make joint ceremonies in a mixed marriage and in an intermarriage, that part of the ceremony is in a Reform temple and part of it will be with a priest or in a church. And there is no obligatory Jewish framework. Also, when they perform a conversion, it's very light. The study is very minimal, and there is no demand to accept keeping mitzvot. But they do generally, I don't know if we can say this 100%, they do generally have, for a person who's conversion, Brit Milah and mikveh, and I think also for babies who are born. I think generally speaking, probably not 100%, but probably still a high percent that do perform the Brit Milah. So this is a basic description. And of course, as I said before, this brings us to today, and you'll have a variety of different Reform communities and people. And I'd like to mention a few points for discussion. One is, let's help me. Okay. One is, okay, it's absolutely fine to be critical, to have criticism towards what we just described. I would say there's no place for generalization or mocking. When I say generalization or mocking, I mean the following. There was about a year ago, there was some item in the news or on Facebook and social media about how the Reform rabbis make bar mitzvahs for dogs. Did any of you, any of you hear about this? Remember this from, I don't know, a year or two ago? There was something like that. And it's probably not absolutely lacking basis, because there were 3, 5, 10 rabbis who did something like this for someone's dog, that where the family wanted their dog to be part of the community or I don't know what. It does seem to me ridiculous, yes, but it doesn't mean that this is what's done in Reform communities. If you saw it done in one Reform community and you went out and said, oh, you see, make fun of it, this is what they do, then I would say what I would expect you to do is to carry out a little bit of minimal research. You know, how many of these things have happened? 17 in the last 200 years. Okay, so it's not the Reform movement. So, be accurate before you discuss something. And I don't see the value of it. And what does it mean? And why do you do this? Did anyone ask someone who did this? Maybe it was very important for their congregants, for a certain family. And he said, rather than being strict and estranging them from the community, I will do what they asked and will make a ceremony for their Jewish dog. Do I agree with him or not? I won't say, but at least he's, maybe there's some reason to do this in some community, in some framework. So I just wouldn't use things like that for mocking, even though when you want to disagree with things that you think they're wrong, that is absolutely fine. I want to say about what we've discussed here, that the Reform, it's not that they have totally wiped out any boundaries or frameworks. They have erased many boundaries and many issues of frameworks to the extreme by moving Shabbat to Sunday, at the extreme by having a mixed marriage that is performed both by a rabbi and by a priest, certainly things of that kind. So they've pushed beyond the boundaries about many things. but they have kept some limits, and in some form they have even retracted and moved back to some boundaries that they kind of moved beyond in the 19th century, maybe returned to in the 20th century. Maybe they themselves experienced that they went too far. What I would say is there isn't a clear framework with criteria. How do you make decisions? How do you decide what is primitive and no longer necessary? And how do you decide what isn't? There's certainly no, I did not see in any of this belief in Torah min hashamayim, okay? In something about the Torah being God-given. I did, by the way, discuss this once with a female Reform rabbi who I met around the COVID issues. We did some joint discussion about, how to help people, what help people need during Corona as community leaders and so on. And I became, had a positive relationship discussing things with her, and actually went to visit her one day. She lives and works in Haifa, and we discussed different things. And yes, her belief is that there is something God-given about inspiration from God about the Torah, not the details, the psukim, the mitzvot, not to those details, but there is something which is an inspiration from God about the Torah. And I think it's important to discuss this and what does it mean? What are you trying to teach? What are you saying to your community when you try to teach about this? What is the value of the Torah? And the decisions about what not to keep were not made with that in mind, not with having any rules and criteria as to how you make decisions. And I would like to point out that what I pointed out last time as well, that the weakness and the value of these Reform communities is at the same point. The value is because there is some Judaism here, something Jewish that for some people is going to keep them within the Jewish community. Some children who were born Jewish, and they're going to have some Jewish identity, and who knows where it's going to take them. They're going to be connected to a temple, to a Jewish community, to some Jewish education, to Israel, to coming to visit Israel, to being either pro-Israel or anti-Israel, because they feel that as a Jew, they have a greater responsibility to protest against what Israel is doing to Palestinians and so on. But by the way, I'm not saying this cynically. I'm serious. I think that if a person knows that he's Jewish and is active against Israel because he feels responsibility towards things that he thinks Israel is doing wrong, that's Jewish identity. I'm not kidding. This is not a joke.
No, I know.
Keeps him connected in some way to Judaism. And even though I totally disagree, maybe with some things I do agree.
May I interrupt very briefly, Rabbi? Not to criticize Israel, but to criticize Israeli policies. Big difference.
Okay. But the fact that he lives with non-Jews and feels the need to join them in criticizing Israel, for instance, is a point of Jewish identity that in sometimes unusual roundabout ways can bring a person to be more to direct more energy towards what is this Judaism that he is part of, and sometimes can have positive results. But at the same time, the weakness is the same point, because it's, as we said 2 weeks ago, it's watered down. It's left very little of Judaism, which is why some people can connect to it, because it doesn't demand very much from them. So it's the same two-sided sword, so to speak, that can be positive and I can be critical of it, and I can be seeing a certain point of value in it. And I want to make that point. And there's also some positive intention here. People don't do this because they're against the people of Israel. They do this because they think this will be good for retaining Jewish identity. And two last points. One is what I said before when I pointed this out, that the question is, what is it doing? Because this female Reform rabbi that I mentioned before, who I met with, her point, her goal is to take Israelis. It's an Israeli community, and her goal, her mission, is to find Israelis who have zero Jewish identity, who have no community, for whom certainly strict religious Orthodox communities will be totally irrelevant, and even, dare I say so, people who are more open-minded communities like, David, very nice, inclusive, mechitza in the middle, etc., is not, will totally be, they will feel rejected and will not connect to that. So her goal is to be a point that that connects some people to their Jewish identity. That is her goal. And I can identify her with her for her taking upon herself that mission. And at the same time, we will have our differences of opinion, but I will see that as a positive point for us to connect to. And the last point I'd like to make is to ask myself, all those points where I have criticism of the Reform movement, can I ask myself this question? Will I have that will there be the same criticism about ourselves, or even partially? Should we have the same criticism about ourselves? Do we sometimes, not to the same extent, but do we sometimes water down our Judaism? Do we not? There are things. Why does someone say about me he can't say no? Because I will be lenient about all kinds of things. Because if there is a lenient opinion and a strict opinion, which one will I say to a person who's asking me a question? Depends who that person is. Sometimes I will say, my dear brother or sister, there is a strict opinion and a lenient opinion. I'll make your decision. I won't make the decision for you. I will let you know that there is an opinion that says forbidden, and there is an opinion that says it's permitted. Now you make the decision, and I'll try to learn with you and understand why there are these two different opinions. So why am I not saying to this person, it's better to be strict, it's better to be to say no, it's better not to do this, because maybe that's not good for him. Maybe it's better for him to choose a path that is easier for him, because otherwise he will be pushed away. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not demanding enough from people. Maybe I'm not pushing people to make progress in their religious life. And it would be better if I was pushing people or encouraging people more to take more and more upon themselves. Maybe the same kinds of criteria would be true about us. I would say, to say that we have no boundaries. I'm saying myself and rabbis who are close to my opinions. I'm close to their opinions. We certainly have limits and boundaries. We certainly use halachic criteria and halachic discussions before we make halachic decisions, and don't just say, oh, you don't want to do it. It seems to you primitive. Don't do it. We don't work that way. We do have frameworks and criteria. So that I certainly would not say as criticism of us. But some people might say, even though they use the halachic boundaries and discussion, they're too easy to reach lenient decisions. There are five rabbinic authorities who say yes, and 295 who say no, and they say, let's go with the 5. See, they're doing wrong. So I can understand that there is some overlap of the same things that I will say about Reform communities and rabbis that others will say about the attitude that my friends and I try to project within Am Yisrael. And look at our discussions. If you come on Shabbat afternoon before Mincha, our discussions about conversion. No, we are not doing the same thing. We are not saying you can be Jewish easily. We demand at least a year long of study and studying halakha and being on Shabbat with religious families where you learn how to keep Shabbat and so on. But at the end of the day, when they come to convert and they say, I take upon myself mitzvot, do we not know? Are we lying to ourselves? Are we not aware that some of these converts who come today because they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend who's
Right.
Jewish and they're not Jewish, all they want is the document that says you're Jewish and to be a citizen in the state of Israel, and they're not really interested in Torah and mitzvot. I know that there are some of them, that's what they are, and that's what they're going to be. So you could say, to a certain extent, you could say the same. There are people who say, because of that, I disagree with you about these conversions. You shouldn't be encouraging them. So we discussed on Shabbat. I'm not going to get into all the details tonight. Why we do encourage these conversions because we want to try and encourage, and some of them will keep some of the mitzvot, and some of them will keep all of the mitzvot and be seriously religious, committed people. But I can understand that some of the same things that I would say about Reform, someone who's more strict, not more religious, not more Orthodox, more strict than I am, might say some of those same points of criticism about myself, and I can understand that. So it becomes an argument, because I will argue with them, yes, but I am using halachic criteria and sources and reasoning. You can disagree, but disagree respectfully. You can disagree, but understand that what I'm doing has legitimate halachic boundaries and framework, and then you can disagree with it. Don't say about me, who reformi. That's a very big avera to do that, because you can say about him, he's too lenient, he's too makel, he's causing damage to Am Yisrael. That's how do you say? What's the word? That's what's the word? It's not based on. No. It's not based on findings. It's what's the word? Sorry, not intuitive. Someone who died. Okay,
Conjecture?
what would he have said about X, Y, or Z? No,
Hypothetical. Hypothetical?
hypothetical. That's it. It's hypothetical. Am I causing damage to Am Yisrael, or am I doing good to Am Yisrael? You know, it's very vague and hypothetical. Try 10, 20, 30 years from now, and the people that I influenced, that they become, did they strengthen the Jewish community or weaken the Jewish identity, or weaken the Jewish identity? It's not easy to ascertain anything very clearly about that. But you want to say it, and I think that you're going to cause damage. That's a legitimate claim. We can discuss it. But to say in the same way that I would say about someone who's reformed, he's reformed, therefore what he's doing is not acceptable according to halakha, and to say about me, he's reformed. No, it's not the same thing. So if you want to have some criticism, let's discuss it in detail. Bevakasha, Tova, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, I'm just a little bit concerned. Everything sounds nice. I'm very happy to have to be mekarev, to have people come near, closer to Yahadut. I'm just concerned. What happens if, when somebody who considers himself for years now a Jew, because he's in the Reform movement, and his mother is not Jewish, but he is a Jew because he goes to the Reform as a temple. Now, what happens when he wants to marry my granddaughter? What do I do?
Which is why, first of all, I totally agree with you about this concern. It's not a matter of agreeing. I share this concern with you. Thank you for bringing it up. It's very relevant. I share this concern with you. At the same time, so I think what we should do is we should think about, okay, so what do we do about it? And not, therefore, let's go totally all of our energies fighting against the Reform movement. The Orthodox rabbis who do say that make a claim that they are causing terrible damage to Am Yisrael, that they are bringing in non-Jews, that they're bringing them in numbers, which are they bring very large numbers and percentages and so on. I don't know that any of that is based on any kind of research or anything that's based in reality. It's not totally disconnected from reality, because if you have X Reform communities in North America, and every one of those communities has 10, 20, 30% of the community is mixed marriages without conversion, or with conversion that doesn't have any halachic basis for it. So yes, you're talking about communities in which there will be 20, 30%, or at least 15, 20% of the children of those couples that will be born won't be Jewish, and so on. And yet at the same time, I would say, first of all, you still have the 40, 50, 60, 70% of the community for whom these communities will retain some level, minimal level of Jewish identity. So, weigh them out and what's more important. And also let me give a parable. Crossing the street is dangerous. Therefore, let's never cross streets anymore. I don't think that's the answer. The answer is cross at the crosswalk, look very carefully right and left, find ways to cross carefully. So I'm saying don't totally reject the reform people who are reform or reform movement, but yes, let's look for ways to pragmatically keep track of what is going on. So the Rabbanut in Israel, with some things that I have criticism about them, therefore, when you come to get married in Israel, they want to know who married your parents. Your parents have a ketubah. If your parents come with a ketubah that's reformed, so the Rabbanut will say, okay, who said they're Jewish? So I agree, we have to do this. But at the same time, the bdika, the checking on if your parents and grandparents are Jewish, can be done in a more friendly way and doesn't have to be, while at the same time being obnoxious to you. And I'm not saying everyone is in the Rabbanut, but some people sometimes make those mistakes. And so again, I agree with that. And I would not, personally, I would not marry someone who came and I didn't know if they're Jewish. I would object to that marriage. I would not participate. And if they asked me to perform the chuppah, I would say, I don't know. You have to look into the question of your Judaism. And if you don't know that you're Jewish and you don't have any basis for saying that you're Jewish, no, I cannot perform the wedding unless you go through at least a giyur lechumrah or whatever it is. So yes, those are boundaries, absolutely. But we have to think of them in pragmatic fashion.
Okay.
It is.
Well, first of all, we're talking about reform now, right? Not conservative.
We will get to conservative. We're not there yet. Right now we're talking about reform.
But
Yes.
even with the reform, I mean, you sort of hinted at this, but I think the reform in recent years have become much more traditional.
They've become more conservative.
That's right.
They're moving.
There's a famous banquet in the 1920s, I think, in which they served trades, or something like that. You probably know about that.
I don't know a lot about it. I heard about it.
And that would happen now. And also, I think there's a difference. Your source was talking about the educated, upper class people, Jews who left Judaism for less observance. But in the States, there's a different thing where you have a small Jewish community in a small town, like many academic towns, Bloomington, I've been in Charlottesville, Virginia, you've heard that, of course, but in which the people want to be Jewish and preserve the Jewish values, but they cannot get an Orthodox minyan. And so they have a synagogue which sort of spans the various practices. And many of the people are quite traditional in the practice. And many of them drive on Shabbat, is another issue. But as far as keeping kosher and things like that. And they also teach their children Jewish studies and encourage them to marry within the community. And this would all be lost if you didn't accept non-Orthodox streams in smaller towns.
I will say something that I was going to say much later on, but because of your comment, I will mention it in short here. And that is a quote of Rav Nachum Eliezer Rabinovich. Rav Rabinovich was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshivat Esder in Ma'ale Adumim. He was before that a rabbi in England, and in the United States, no, in Canada, in Toronto. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that he was one of the people who influenced Rabbi Sachs to go into rabbinate. In any case, Rabbi Rabinovich passed away not that long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years. Maybe I have it a little bit wrong, maybe a bit more than that, but not much more than that. And he has a responsa, a book of Shelot Utshuvot, shoot of halachic questions. And one of the issues that he brings there is there was a discussion, I believe this was in Toronto, don't remember the years, I have it written down, where there was a mikveh, and the Reform and Conservative would also use the mikveh for their conversion. And there were Orthodox people who were opposed to allowing them to use the mikveh because you're encouraging Reform conversions and so on. And his reaction, Rabbi Rabinovich, his reaction, I have to say, Rabbi Rabinovich was absolutely accepted in all the Tzioni Dati circles as a leading Talmid Chacham. And he also had unique attitudes. I'll tell you a little story about him in a moment. He was very accepted in spite of his unique way of thinking about halacha, but he was certainly a very halachic, committed Talmid Chacham. And he fought against these people, struggled against these people who tried to stop allowing the Reform and Conservative to use the Orthodox mikveh. Open parentheses, it probably means that the only mikveh around was the Orthodox mikveh.
Right.
So they didn't use a mikveh much, they didn't have much use for it. So they used the Orthodox mikveh, which also says something about commitment and lack of commitment. But he said that the wars, the struggles, the strife that you create, he said it's all Yetzer Hara. Do I have to translate the words Yetzer Hara? If I do, I'll need your help. The evil inclination. But he's saying it's too late. If a person is going through a Reform conversion, struggling against him and not allowing him to use the Orthodox mikveh for his Reform conversion, you came too late. And he said what we need to do is put a lot of energy into Jewish education. Teach Torah, teach Torah, teach Torah. So you want to struggle about the souls of the Jews around the world. Why am I coming up with this now in reaction to what you were saying? You need to send a rabbi to that town, to that academic town that you mentioned, where there's only a Reform synagogue, or they have different parts in the synagogue where people sit separate, mixed, without a mechitza, or mixed, whatever. You need to send a shaliach there. You have to appreciate Chabad in that sense for having shlichim in all kinds of places like that, including one couple who made aliyah to Israel and came through, David for 1 year, who were told by a Chabad rabbi in the US to go through a Reform conversion because there was no Orthodox conversion where they were living. And with a Reform conversion, they would be recognized in Israel as Jews, and then by the state, and then they could make aliyah, and then they could go through an Orthodox conversion, which is exactly the process they did. They followed the advice of this Reform, of this Chabad rabbi, and they went through a Reform conversion, made aliyah, were in Ra'anana for 1 year, went through a totally Haredi conversion in Bnei Brak. That year that they were here, I actually made one of the brachot at the chuppah, which was performed by one of the leading Haredi rabbis in Bnei Brak, but it was done here in Ra'anana. And after that, they left us because we're too open-minded. So they moved on to somewhere that was more according to what they were looking for, which is fine. They have every right to do so, and it's absolutely fine that they chose their way. But I'm saying maybe we're not as strong as Chabad in having shlichim, giving Jewish education in other places. I have to say that's not saying Chabad are better than us. We're a little stronger than Chabad in having soldiers in Tzahal. That's also a mitzvah. We're also stronger than Chabad in having scientists who are improving the world, and then having doctors. So I'm not saying we are anachnu lo beseder, but I'm saying as much as we can, we have to put our mind, put our energies into driving more and more young people to go into Jewish education and fighting and putting and having mesirut nefesh. What's the term? Having devotion, dedication to Jewish education. That's what we should be doing, and not fighting and all kinds of. I'm not saying it's okay. Everybody do their thing. You want to have reform Jewish education, conservative Jewish. I don't care. No, I care, but I can't be critical of them if they have Jewish education, and I'm not there at that place giving Jewish education that I believe in. So you think there's need for more Orthodox Jewish education in the version, in the balance that you believe in? Good, do it. Bring out more of that Jewish education. And I say that also as a person who struggles in Israel for more open-minded religious education. And in order to, and I understand, this is not criticism of people who are less open-minded, modern, call it whatever you want, than myself, as Dati Leumi people and are in Jewish education. They get more people for Jewish education than we do, the open guys. That's not criticism of them. Good for them. We need what we should be doing is not criticizing them. You're too closed-minded in your education. We need to get more open-minded young men and women who are right? Open Orthodox, to go out there in Jewish education. That's what we need to do. So don't fight against people who are doing things different than you. Fight to do more of what you believe in. That's what I'm trying to say. And one last thing about Rabbi Rabinovich before Ilana will speak up. I will say that Rav Rabinovich, I was once at a conference of rabbis with three leading rabbis, Rav Ariel, who is alive and is well and should live and be well, Ad 120 and beyond. Rav Lichtenstein, who passed away some 9 years ago, and Rav Rabinovich, who passed away a few years after. And they discussed the question of adoption, of halachic questions about adoption. When you adopt a child, are you allowed to have yichud with that child? Because if it's your child, your biological child, your son or daughter, you're allowed to be alone at home with that child. There are no issues of nigi'ah, of touching that child, of giving a hug and a kiss to that child. What happens when you adopt a child? So Rav Lichtenstein was very complex in his halachic answer. Rav Ariel was very clear in his halachic answer. I'm not going to get into the details right now. And Rav Rabinovich was, boom. He said, the Gemara says that a person who adopts a child, it's as if he gave birth to that child. The Gemara says this. It doesn't say this in a halachic framework. It says this in a framework of hashkafa, of morality, of what a holy thing it is to do, what a lofty thing it is to do, to adopt a child who is left alone without parents. So the Gemara is saying, good for you, you're such a tzaddik. You adopt a child who is alone, it's as if you gave birth to that child. But Rav Rabinovich said, if the Gemara says it's as if you gave birth to that child, therefore halachically, it's as if you gave birth to that child. No questions of touching, hugging, kissing, being alone with that child. Once you adopted the child, he's your child, just as if he was your biological child. So this is not the way the most rabbis function halachically. And this was a Rav Rabinovich, just to tell you one thing about him. But he was very well accepted in the Dati Leumi circles in Israel. And going back to our issue, Ilana.
Back to the issue of allowing people to use the mikveh. I'm here as a witness to say that the Masorti movement has fought huge battles with Orthodoxy here in Israel. We're not talking about Chutz La'aretz, to be allowed to use the mikvaot for conversion, to such an extent that I was involved in teaching a conversion course for the Masorti movement. And at the end of the course and at the end of the Beit Din, the people completing the course had to go into the water not in a mikveh, in the ocean. And if you have any idea how dangerous that is with waves, and I witnessed something that was virtually life-threatening, and I will never forget it. One of the converts was signaling to her daughter, who was back at the shore, a little girl around 7 or 8, and the little girl misunderstood her mother. And the people were all, they took off their clothing when they were already under the water, etc., etc. It was modest in that regard. And the little girl started heading toward her mother. I had to run. And now I'm, besides, I was still wearing contact lenses in those days. I don't take my lenses out, but then I don't put my face in the water in the ocean. I had to run and grab this little girl and carry her back to shore because there was a huge undertow. Now, if people who are in charge of those mikvaot had allowed the Masorti movement to use any of their mikvahs, nobody's life would have been endangered. I would like to suggest that not only was this little girl's life endangered, but so was mine. But there's a point here, and that is about deliberately excluding fellow Jews.
Rabbi, the person that goes in for tefillah is tameh. The person that goes in, when a woman goes into tefillah, it's after menstruation, right? So she's tameh. So what difference does it make if somebody else goes in? It doesn't make a difference.
It's not a halachic issue. It's a question of struggle. Well, first
That's
of all,
what I'm saying.
1 second. Yeah, I agree. Ilana, I understand the story and I understand the energies. With all two comments. One is that next time we meet, we'll start discussing the Masorti movement with conservative and Masorti. But the issue of the mikveh, I understand, is what connects to what we were discussing. Certainly, it shouldn't lead to that.
But it does.
But I'm thinking of two different solutions. One is there are places in Israel where the control of the big frameworks of Rabbanut is less. Orthodox places where they're more independent. It's like a kibbutz dati and things like that. You might find more cooperation there. And two, and this is partial criticism of the Masorti movement, they should have their own mikveh. They should spend the money and the resources and have a mikveh for different purposes. If they don't use it for married couples, use it for conversions. But
today,
make their own mikveh.
There are some today, but this was a good 10 years ago.
Okay.
And I will never forget the experience, obviously. And the fact that they could not get access, and it's not like they didn't try. I'm not talking about the individual, I'm talking about representatives from the movement. I find heinous.
You're right.
Okay. Yes.
I was gonna say that, like in places like the US, there is so spread out, especially where I'm from in Monterey, Salinas area, and there's so few Jews.
Are you there now?
Yes, no, I'm in Ranana, but when we go there, the nearest mikveh is an hour and a half away, and they charge about $60 every time you go use a mikveh, which I can't believe it. And it's inconvenient. So I've also been like stuck having to go in 55-degree water. And it's dangerous enough. I don't see why they wouldn't just share, because it's so expensive to run a mikveh and to keep it staffed. It's not subsidized like it is here, and it's to make people purified. It's a whole, I don't know. I just don't see.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I understand. But again, first of all, the bottom line is I agree. But and I was quoting Rabbi Rabinovich, who was saying that there's no point It's Yetzer Hara to to fight over this issue and to create this animosity about no, we won't let you use our mikveh because we disagree with your conversion. It's not the right kind of thing to do, and it's not the right time and place in the sense that you're too late. You missed out on this family's Jewish education some decades ago, and this is where their children are at now, intermarrying with someone who's using the mikveh for some kind of very partial conversion. So it's not, I understand this. He's saying it's too late for that. And he's saying making a war about it is Yetzer Hara. But the right thing to do is to, yes, I would like to educate, to promote and spread more of the Jewish education that I believe in. And that would be what I would side with. At the same time, I would ask, sometimes it's true. Is it because there's somebody, I would ask the same question that I ask myself as someone who is an advocate, and part of the work that I do is about advancing open-minded, inclusive Jewish religious education in Israel, within the religious educational system in Israel. At the same time, I have a problem with people who agree with me, and I go to yeshivot and midrashot where they're teaching young men and young women Torah, and I try to speak to them, guys, we need people going into education. And we have a weakness because we don't teach people the only valuable thing to do in life is Torah. We tell young men and women, you can be a scientist, you can be a doctor, you can be a computer scientist, you can be anything you want. And they're all valuable. Make something valuable of it. And we don't tell everybody only teach Torah and only be teachers and educators. We don't say that, but it creates a weakness of ourselves, and that's our responsibility to do something about it. So sometimes our communities or educational communities will be spread out, and sometimes what you're saying is an objective fact, not because the local or the closest conservative rabbi doesn't care about having a mikveh, but because he's the only guy within a few hundred miles who's trying to create any kind of conservative or reform community.
And
So
they're
you can't
expensive. They're
maintain,
expensive to run. They're
you
really
can't
expensive
maintain
to
a
run.
mikveh. That's what I'm saying. You can't maintain a mikveh under those
That's right.
conditions. I agree. That has to be taken into account. Thank you for that point. At the same time, does the movement, as a movement, try to do this? Does it try to be helpful? Do they? In Orthodoxy, you'll have organizations for mikvahs. Sometimes I think that's extreme. Also, the only mitzvah they're going to raise money for is another mikveh. I'm not saying it's not important. What is the balance? But is there someone within conservative or reform rabbinate who's trying to do something so that there will be some certain number of mikvahs, or is it a waste of money because nobody's going to use them? I'm not saying that I know the facts.
I think a lot of communities are. I just have another problem that just communities are just dying. Like
Yeah.
in London where I was, there was a strong Jewish community, and then the prices, the value of the houses went up. So now their kids could afford the houses, and then they just moved to another neighborhood. It just happens over and over again. So these older shuls, they're just dying because the kids can't afford to live in that area.
I understand. It's a very valid point, and if I was running an Orthodox mikveh out yonder somewhere, I would think that your points are very valid for my decision making. Besides other reasons why I would not ban others from using the mikveh.
I think
Last
also,
comment, please, Eliezer. Anyone else want to say something, because we're past our bedtime, so to speak?
sorry.
But
Very short question.
For me, that's
Eliezer and then Michael. Yes.
I wonder, in Israel, how many religious councils would approve of conservative mikveh?
Probably. Well, first of all, they might have to by law. And part of the Eliezer is asking, would the religious council accept a non-Orthodox mikveh? And I think just like in the Heschel issue, I think they would have to. But they can't say legally we will only support Orthodox communities. I don't think they can say that. And I believe that in the religious council, there are members, there are representatives who are not Orthodox. At the same time, they may not encourage it and so on, but maybe they should encourage it, because at least there'll be another point of connection. But Probably not won't be very popular. But that's it's one thing not to encourage, and it's another thing to say we're banning it, you can't use it. Last but not least, our representative in Fort Worth,
Not Big Bend either.
not Big Ben.
I think it's important for us to remember that all Jews start off their life non-observant. Everybody has to be taught what to do, and everybody, certainly in today's world, is pretty much a Jew by choice. That may change as anti-Semitism forces us into virtual ghettos, which, it seems like history repeating itself. But we're not there yet. Everybody still has a choice to do or not do. I was taught that probably the most important thing that you can do for somebody is to get them to do one more mitzvah, that is always a big deal. So to start off with somebody that basically almost does nothing, you've got this infinite road that they can follow. And anything that you can do to encourage that person, we should do. So to say, should we accept them or not accept them, to me it's a specious argument. Of course, we should accept them into the community and encourage them to do more. You're going to bang heads from time to time, as we all know, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. The ones that, and in Fort Worth, it's really very interesting. The Reform community doesn't observe almost anything, and yet very, very many of the families here have children and grandchildren that made sure to marry Jews. That's being passed along. And you never know when one of those children are going to, and I can tell you examples of children and grandchildren that found their way to Orthodoxy. So for us to think we can read the future is really chutzpah. You can't do that. Just a brief comment on the mikveh thing. Our understanding is that a mikveh is either kosher or not based on its construction. And if you build it correctly and you have it, et cetera, it's kosher. I'm not aware of any one person jumping into a mikveh and making it non-kosher because of what they do or who they are. So the idea that you have to have a different mikveh for each denomination is really foolish to me, and as far as the costs involved, it's just kind of stupid.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We have what to
Bye.
look forward to. Let's see, in 2 weeks, we're still a week before Pesach. In 3 weeks, we are Pesach. So in 3 weeks, we will not, whatever will not be a shiur, but in 2 weeks, is everybody still okay with? We're a week before Leil HaSeder. We're 6 days before Leil HaSeder. We're still okay to stop cleaning and cooking for Pesach and take an hour off to discuss the Masorti conservative movement. Okay.
Okay.
See you then.
Thank you. Bye.
Laila tov.
Right,
Thanks so
bye.
much.
Laila tov.
Good to see everybody.
Good to see
Okay.
everybody. Yasher koach.